Well, first of all, thank you, everybody from around the world, because we are going to celebrate World Statistics Day. And I've just been kind of impressed because usually statistics, I think, gets sort of a bad reputation. People say, oh, yuck, statistics, why do we need it? And so, you know, we don't often get a chance to come together and actually have a celebration for statistics. So this is going to be a virtual conversation with people around the world. And as you'll see from our panelists, they truly do come from a global area, I guess I'll say. And then you're probably looking in the chat too to see where we have attendees also from around the world. So this event is being co-hosted by Wendy Martinez, that's me. I'm the current ASA president, that's the American Statistical Association. And my day job, I also work at the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the United States. And my co-host is Xiaoli Meng, who's going to talk about the Harvard Data Science Review, who's one of the sponsors of this event. So we have three speakers. Each one is going to talk for about 10 minutes. And they're going to give us their perspectives on the future of national statistics. So first we have Ola Awad, hopefully I'm saying her name correctly, who's the president of the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics. Next we have Erica Groshin, who's a former commissioner of the BLS. So I've had the honor and privilege of having her as my boss, I guess, for the 4 years while she was there. And our third speaker will be Wesley Young, who's director of the Economic Statistics Methods Division in Statistics Canada. And this is going to be followed by three discussants. We're very honored to have Sir Ian Diamond, who's the UK national statistician, followed by John Baylor, who's the president of the International Statistical Institute, and then Rob Santos, who is the incoming ASA president, so he'll be serving in 2021. And we're asking each of the discussants to kind of respond to what the three speakers said, and each talk for about 5 minutes. So hopefully that'll give us about 20 minutes for questions and answers from you, the attendees. And so please, as Donna said earlier, put your questions in the Q&A box, and then we'll have a record of them, and we'll be ask them questions. And we're going to have closing remarks by John Pullinger, and I think I put the wrong slides up here because I left his name off. John Pullinger, who's the president of the International Association for Official Statistics. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Xiaoli so he could share some opening remarks with us. Oh, and I should conclude, I guess, with the sponsors for this event today.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Wendy, if you stop sharing. Okay, you stopped.
There we go. I passed that test anyway.
Thank you very much. And welcome, everyone. And we're very excited to be able to host this event of celebrating the World Statistical Days. And as Wendy said, that I'm the editor of the Harvard Data Science Review. And I just want to talk very briefly about this free sources for you, for all of you, particularly around the world. This is a relatively new publishing venue. We started about a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago. And we publish everything data science and data science for everyone. And particularly, we have this emphasis on, official statistics or government statistics. And so I was very pleased when Wendy reached out to me about, co-hosting this event. And we are actually planning to have a written version of this event. So all these panelists of speakers that you may or may not know, that you will be also invited to write something that later and for this event, so others will have more to read. I just want to show you one article last year, early this year, we published last year's President of ASA's address, the invite address, and it's really on the census, which are talking about the importance of having these good census data, how they support a democratic society. I think we'll hear a lot about these issues today. And as many of you know, that at least in the United States this year, we have the 2020 census coming, which itself will be implementing this idea of differential privacy, protection for these data, which has generated a lot of discussions because there's a trade-off between utility of the data and the privacy of the data. And I think today you'll be hearing a lot of these related issues. And I wanted to welcome everyone again and hope that you will check out the Harvard Data Science Review, which is entirely free, and just search for the phrase. And if you have any question, you can certainly email me. I myself is looking forward to this discussion because there are really a lot to be learned. And I think particularly as everybody knows, we're in this tremendous pandemic, which really made everybody aware of the importance of the data, particularly assess the uncertainty, planning and the uncertainty. And with all the other things going on, that this has been an incredible year, but it's also really a terrific year for statisticians and data scientists more generally, because we just have a lot more to do. None of us are sleeping much, but that's a good problem to have. And so we will be hearing a lot more today, probably lots of headaches, as well as lots of solutions. So again, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jali. That was very helpful. And I'm sure hopefully people will submit things to the journal and then also read the excellent articles. So I think next up, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we have Ola, who is going to give us some remarks.
Thank you. Thank you. Actually, I'm really so happy to be with you. I'm trying just to share my presentation. Just a second, please. And before I start, on the occasion of today, our International Statistics Day, I want to congratulate all of you. So for all the efforts that we are actually working on bringing data on board. Today, actually, my presentation will focus on what is the future of official statistics. I may say now we have shift of roles. We are talking about modernization of statistics and modernization of national statistical offices. First, we used to have our main role is production of official statistics. Now we are moving towards management and monitoring of data system, rather only production of official statistics. We were talking and we were working only on statistics, and now we are developing our work to more data and more data science. Our main partner in official statistics in the national statistical system was mainly the government and the government institutions and ministries. Now, with the new role, with the development of the future of official statistics, our partners is not limited only to government. It is expanded also to private sector, which wasn't the case before, to more partnering with universities, with the civil organizations and research centers.
Ola,
sorry to interrupt, but we are only seeing the directory. We're not seeing your presentation.
Right, your photo is not shared.
Actually, I have, you are screen sharing, actually. This is what I'm receiving. I don't know, you're not
we're not seeing the presentation.
My PowerPoint presentation?
No, we're seeing just the directory. So maybe you're not sharing your full desktop.
So,
resharing, just once you open the sharing, click on that screen with your slides. I think you were sharing a wrong screen. Yeah, we see it now.
Yeah, you're seeing that?
Yeah. Now she's correct. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So it's clear now, yeah?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. So I was just mentioned before that our role was production of official statistics. We're moving to role as NSOs to more management and monitoring of data system. We are talking about statistics before and official statistics. We're more talking about data now and data science. Our partners before, it was limited only to government. Now it's not at all limited to government. It is expanded more to partnering with the private sector, more partnering with universities, research centers, and civil organizations. So the modernization of statistics that we are now, moving towards it, we are talking about more of data interoperability, more of data stewardship. And this entails more development of our methodologies, and communication and partnership is as important as also the production of data. So this is part of the new roles that it entails, the work in the national statistical offices towards the future of official statistics. So when I talk about data here, more about data interoperability is how we can really work on developing the data of admin data, and within the data stewardship, how we can actually partnering with the private sectors to getting more data from different sources. So, and this entails the development of our methodologies, and also partnering more and more and communicating more and more in this regard. So, so the development of methodologies. So we are talking about different expanding our data sources, including big data, open data, the different data science tools to utilize statistical projects, data mining, artificial intelligence, etc. So we must ensure data interoperability to make the best of use, to make the best use of admin data, especially in our developing countries, and also in the developed countries, where admin data sources in our developing countries are really still fragile and in need more on capacity development. And it's very important also to get use of more on using really the geospatial data in that perspective. What this entails, these changes require an update to our fundamental principles while ensuring their implementation. The principles must keep up with the recent developments in the world of data. An update in the fundamental principles means an update in the code of practice and eventually in the statistical law. What the future of official statistics requires to such kind of development? It needs more capacity developments, not only in the national statistical offices, but not also limited to the national statistical offices, also to all of our data partners. The development of the IT infrastructure is crucial, because such kind of development needs a real strong IT infrastructure. It needs financial support. It needs a kind of complementary of roles, engaging in partnership and engaging in other communities such as researchers and policymakers. So we should have also, when we talk about NSOs and chief statisticians, we should have also certain qualities to make this development in roles, engaging in partnerships, engaging in other communities, and providing guidance on standards and principles. And this is all actually a summary, a brief summary of how I look as a chief statistician in a developing country towards official statistics. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ola. That was very interesting. Yes.
Thank you.
It's hard to have applause when you're virtual. Okay, thank you. So the next speaker, I believe, is Erica Grosjean. So Erica, you have the floor.
Okay. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I want to thank the Harvard Data Science Review and the ASA for the invitation to speak to you today. And I'm going to start off by saying something. Actually, you'll hear a lot of resonance between what Ola said and what I'm saying. Our slides look different, but I think our thoughts are not so different. The reason I have the picture of the COVID virus here is because I think that, as crises often do, the pandemic makes many of the ongoing challenges in the statistical system with official statistics very starkly apparent. Because we find ourselves in these crises focused on the need for even better statistics to guide critical decisions. Now, of course, without what we have today, we'd really be flying blind, but it's actually a testament to how useful the statistics we have are, that people are crying for more. So what is it that they're crying for? Let's see, there we go. I break them into 6 categories. People want more granularity to better inform local decisions and to help target policy. There's certainly a cry for more timeliness and frequency because the crisis is moving quickly. They would like more consistency across products so that different data products can be linked and combined to fill out information. There's a need for more agility to pivot to new questions, things we never thought we'd be interested in 2 years ago, right? And certainly not 20 years ago. I think there's even more attention now than in the past to the need for guaranteed independence from political influence. And privacy protection is another important part, that people want more privacy protection and more assurance that it's there. So what I want to do is, at breakneck speed, run through some of the context. What's the past? What's the present? So how to get to where we are. And this will be pretty focused on the US, although I think a lot of the themes are present elsewhere as well. Then I'm going to talk about the future, and I'm going to break that up into the bad and the good scenarios, and then go through some of what I would say are probably the prerequisites for a good scenario, and then conclude. So what's the past? Well, in the past, at various times, the BLS, for example, is in the late 1880s, policymakers realized that official statistics are a public good. That is, they are not both non-excludable, you can't prevent people from knowing about them, and they're non-rivalrous, that my use of statistics does not threaten your use of statistics. And theory tells us that those sorts of goods will be undersupplied if left only to the private market. And I think that the current situation also shows us that it's particularly in times of conflict, crisis, and partisanship that we really need to have these statistics to help us make our way. So the US federal statistical system was created piecemeal as various crises and issues arose. A new part of it was created in a different place. But over time, there has been convergence through the common elements of the mission, through legislation that has helped to bring them together, and also through the development of the professional practices and the science of statistics, data science. The continuous improvement has led to convergence in methods. So that is good. So where do we arrive at the present? Well, we tend to have data products that are either timely or granular, rarely both. These products are largely survey-based, even as response rates are falling. And the production, as I suggested before, is largely balkanized. It's hard to combine or link products across programs. And all of the new methods that are coming into use rely very heavily on a deep IT infrastructure and skills. Meanwhile, in the present, we can see that there are changes to operations and to funding. Particularly, we have declining real budgets for most of the agencies, and this leads to pressures to share IT and other costs. But when you share them with non-statistical agencies, these threaten the independence of the statistical agencies. At the same time, we have a growing number of uses and users of official statistics that want to use it for evidence-based policy, and also more private and very diverse uses and users. So this is taking place with some very interesting public perception of official statistics. The respondents to surveys are increasingly vocal about resenting the burden and the loss of privacy that may come with responses. Users, on the other hand, want more and more products. And while the public in general distrusts government and statistics, they are actually relatively positive about official statistics in particular, which is kind of interesting. Now, the other thing that's going on right now is this tremendous growth in data science and non-official statistics. There's this innovations in data sources that Ola went through. There are the innovations in technology, the hardware, the software for AI, linking, modeling, and also this growth in uses of official statistics for benchmarking, validation, modeling, analytical journalism that just really weren't in place even 10 years ago. So all of these things add up to some important implications for statistical agencies. Huge amounts of new opportunities in the face of serious resource constraints. More apparent competition as others produce what might be seen as substitutes. More disclosure risks, and more need for training and also more competition for skilled data scientists. So what kind of future does this lead us to? Well, I mean, we could envision a future where we just continue to muddle through all of these conflicting influences. I would argue that that is inherently unstable, because that's where we confront growing unmet needs, growing risks, and untapped potential. And that is not a recipe for stability. So which direction are we going to go from here? We could go in the direction of the worst case scenario. And that is the self-reinforcing downward spiral where, and you can start anywhere on the list, but they lead to each other and they just build on each other. Defunding by the government. That will emphasize the problems caused by lower response rates as people lose faith in the accuracy of, and people lose faith in the accuracy of statistics, and there isn't enough money to follow up on response rates. So those will keep getting lower. Defunding also leads to less independence as the home departments influence statistical agency decisions more because they become more interdependent. You get less public trust in accuracy and objectivity. You get more loss of human capital to the private sector. And then the private sector starts to step in. And this could easily lower the quality of the data that people rely on. Private statistics have no obligation towards transparency, which is problematic. And as I mentioned before, a private sector provision will, theory tells us that private sector provision of public goods will lead to an undersupply of those statistics. So this downward spiral is self-reinforcing, and I think a very problematic outcome for official statistics. On the other hand, there is certainly the possibility and great hope for a better future. And the prerequisites are really not so tough. We have a good start already. The stats agencies have demonstrated, certainly in the US and many other countries, a lot of flexibility, more coordination in the past, and more data sharing than we've seen before. And the recently passed in the US Bipartisan Evidence Act promotes use of administrative data in ways that hadn't been in place before. So that's really a good start. And I think the prerequisites, as I said, for getting on the better path are much more doable, are quite doable. That we know how to promote and protect the independence of statistical agencies. We can divorce them even more from the influence of politics and policymakers. We know how there are ways to obtain secure and adequate funding. Certainly, it's very important because there are so many possible uses of funding to have engagement with users to guide priorities. There's a lot of that already. There could be more. Better data access is important to reduce the cost, the time, and the red tape to produce statistics. And this involves encouraging participation by government, by companies, government agencies, common standards for data elements and their curation, safe repositories. We know how to do all of those, or we know how to get started on doing those anyway. We also need coordination amongst the producers of different kind of data to support joint products and combining data. I think it's always interesting that the more data we have, in some ways, the more data we find we need, and the more ways we want to combine the data to get to understanding more fully the phenomena that we see. So here's a case where supply does create its own demand. In fact, it leads to burgeoning demand. Better human capital is totally achievable. This is on the technical side, on communication, and also managerial side. Those are all important. And for some of what the statistical agencies need to do, we need a larger scale of operations as appropriate. And this should be amongst statistical agencies, not with non-statistical agencies, again, to protect independence and integrity of the data. So what solutions will give us those prerequisites? Some of them are quite clear. We need more data sharing legislation. Some of it's in place. In the US, we still need more. We can talk about those. Consolidation of the statistical agencies that are now scattered in over 17 different places across the federal government. I would say, interestingly enough, this is neither necessary. You could imagine coordination happening without it, nor is it sufficient, because if you combine the agencies, you could do it badly, right? But nevertheless, I think it may be advisable. This gives us an intentional reset. It would cut red tape, and one thing is then it's easier to build in ongoing risks to a reduction of ongoing risks to independence. So I think it may be advisable, but there certainly are risks to avoid. The risk of having the statistical agency now a bigger target, the risk of diluting the missions of the agencies, and also using the consolidation as an excuse to cut funds. So there are real risks from it. Another important part of the solution, no matter whether you consolidate or not, is more and more consistent funding for the agencies. You want cross-agency funding for certain projects. You want platforms for linking for new products, for experiments that can be used across the agencies. And there are possibilities for doing that. One of my favorites is considering a Tobin tax of financial transactions. That's usually promoted as a way to reduce financial market volatility. It seems like a proper use of some of the returns from a Tobin tax could be to fund the statistical agency. Another important part, and Ola's comments I think are very germane here, is that I think it's important going forward for the statistical agencies to coordinate with the private sector on data schema. these would be jointly arrived at between the private sector and the statistical agencies to lower the burden on the private sector and improve the quality and consistency of the data, both for their uses and for statistical agencies. Firms can then compare their numbers to publish aggregates more easily. And so this can be win-win on all sides. I think there needs to be more focus, also Ola mentioned this, on multiple dissemination modes to meet the diverse needs that are growing. And within the statistical agencies, as in so many places, we need a mindset change or an evolution that says, look, we honor our past innovations by innovating right now. And this may mean changes like differentiating between gold standard official statistics and other products that are also very useful, but maybe aren't quite at the gold standard. Also, you might want to think in terms of having sunset provision for products. That would allow products to die gracefully and reallocating resources to pressing needs. So in conclusion, I'd say I'd like to call the statistics user community to action, do things like research topics that are relevant to statistical products, engaging with statistical agencies, teaching about the statistical system, using your trusted voice in many ways to support the statistical system, and of course, engaging politically, because fundamentally this is a role of government and our elected representatives need to be representing us properly on it. I believe that statistical agencies are at a crossroads with great potential for a future that would serve our countries and the world even better than today. But this will take work, because without that work, the future of official statistics may well be very bleak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erica. That was fantastic. All right, so our third speaker is Wesley Young from Stats Canada.
Thank you, Wendy. Sorry, I didn't prepare slides, so you might have to look at me through this whole discussion. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers, Wendy and Xiaoli, the sponsors and the participants. Looking at the list of other people involved in this, I'm extremely honored to be asked to be part of this panel. And I have to mention that what I will talk about today, these are my opinions and not necessarily that of Statistics Canada. So I thought I'd start with a general definition of Statistics Canada, just so we set the context. This is by no means the only definition, nor am I saying this is the best definition. But I think it's important to understand what do we mean by official statistics. And they are typically produced by national statistical offices. And I think the key thing is they provide an indispensable element in the information system of a democratic society. And really, who are we serving? We're serving the government, all levels of government. We're serving the public with data. And more importantly, we're giving the public and the government and all the policymakers information they need about the economy, the demographic situation of the country, social, environmental situation and stuff like that. So I think what I wanted to point out here is the importance of official statistics. This isn't, the statistics of, for those of you who play hockey, the Corsi Index and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's interesting when you're talking about multi-million-dollar contracts with hockey players. We're talking billions of dollars at risk here, okay, for policymakers and so forth. And to me, what are the key elements of official statistics? And I took this from the fundamental principles of official statistics. I didn't take all of them. But to me, there's two key elements. Trustworthiness. Data users, be them citizens, policymakers, or governments, or marketing researchers or business people, they have to trust the information that is produced. And I think this is something that we can't give up on. Okay, this is to me one of the most important things about official statistics. Part of that trustworthiness is that our statistics have high quality. Okay, and one of the things, I'm a methodologist, so I'm a statistician by trade, and I first to admit it that methodologists tend to think only about accuracy. If you look at quality frameworks, quality guidelines around the world, there's multi-dimensions to quality. So when I talk about high quality, I don't want to talk just about accuracy. And this was mentioned by Ola and Erica as well. Timeliness is becoming more and more important. Relevance is extremely important, and the availability of this data. So when I talk about high quality, I'm going to really put the emphasis on these 4 dimensions. There are other dimensions, but these are the 4 that I've put the emphasis on. So Ola and Erica, going third, a lot of what they said has already been said, but slightly different. I think Eric was talking about the present and in the past. So traditionally, NSOs or National Statistical Organizations, we've used surveys. Okay, we use censuses. We use registers to compile official statistics. 20, 30 years ago, we were the only organizations, national organizations that could do this type of stuff. So we almost had a monopoly. So those were the good days, I guess. Okay, so we produced the statistics. Not that many other statistics were being produced to confront ours. So there wasn't many people questioning our statistics. So the fact that we're here today talking about what is the future of official statistics, I said, okay, so what's changed? Okay, and Ola and Erica have talked a lot of things about what have changed. Some of it I'll repeat here. One of the things is the availability of data. Okay, data is everywhere. Okay, you talk about the Internet of Things. You can get data just about off of just about anything and tell you just about anything you want to know. This data is being collected in real time as well. What else has changed? Well, the availability of the information. So I put information in quotes. I don't want to be like Donald Trump and talk about what fake news. That's not what I'm saying. Okay, what I'm saying is that everyone's an analyst. With all this data floating out there, you can do whatever you want. I mean, the hockey analogy, the NHL now has all of their stats online. You can be an amateur, statistician that wants to learn about hockey stats. You download the data, and you've got all sorts of open source tools that you can use to analyze this data. So everybody's an analyst. And everybody now on social media, they want to tweet this, they want to Snapchat that, they put it on their Facebook. The information is out there. Next point, modern methods. And this was again touched earlier by actually both Ola and Erica. Artificial intelligence, machine learning. Xiaoli had a really nice quote in the chat. Statistics is part of data science. So I haven't used the word data science for a particular reason. I don't think data scientists are aliens that had just popped onto the earth 5 years ago or whatever. This is an evolution, okay? And underlying data science, and Xiaoli put that in there, okay? But these are still modern methods, and I think we have to embrace them, okay? As a traditional, I'll call myself a traditional statistician. I don't mean that in a derogatory fashion. I don't know machine learning, but that doesn't mean that I shouldn't think about it or embrace it, and how can I use it? These new methods, the algorithms are amazingly fast, okay? So when we talk about timeliness, well, we need to embrace these algorithms to see how can we analyze the data a little quicker. They also give us the ability to analyze new data sources, and I put images here in particular. I know that ABS and at Statistics Canada, we're using satellite images or images, I better qualify, to identify housing starts. Okay, so we're grabbing images and we're using convoluted neural nets, machine learning, artificial intelligence to figure out, okay, last week, I think a farmer's field. This week, it looks like there's a house being built there or a structure. We're using it to identify building starts. Could never have done that without these modern tools. Also, it was already mentioned, the ability to share data. And I think this is, again, not something that started last year or 5 years. This has been going on for quite a few years. But administrative data, at least in Canada, is now more available to national statistical organizations than ever before. And the nice thing about this is we're no longer capturing paper forms. Okay, so I have been around long enough. I never did it. I have done when we were still capturing paper tax forms. Okay, somebody was inputting that so that we could bring it into our system. It's all digital now. Okay, and at least in Canada, I don't know what the percentage is, but a large majority of people, and I would assume around the world, are filing their taxes electronically. So it's all there. The last one is the other thing that I think has really changed, as mentioned earlier, declining response rates, okay, increased collection costs, and our desire to reduce respondent burden. And this is pushing all of the NSOs or national statistical organizations to alternate data sources. This is a good thing in some point. Sometimes we need to be a little bit careful. So these are all as sort of the outside, I don't know if they're outside, but these are all of the pressures or the things that we're seeing that are changing the future official stats. So in my mind, what is the future official statistics? And again, these are my, I personally think things are very bright. Okay, this was mentioned earlier by Erica. One thing, this pandemic, some people have survived better than others. But one thing this pandemic has illustrated is the importance of data. Okay, and more importantly, the importance of good data practices. Ola was mentioning it. She used the word data stewardship. I was looking for it, and I saw it there, and I thought, oh, that's exactly what we're talking about. We need standards. Okay, so for instance, if someone passes away in a long-term care home, is it a COVID death? I don't know. They didn't go to the hospital because of COVID, but it could have been COVID related. So we need standards. The pandemic has also shown, this is actually a quote from our chief statistician, is the power of the and, integration of data. What happens if we combine this source and this source and this source and this source? You just get the power of the data, or the information that comes out is multiplied. Quality assessments. Okay, this is something that NSOs have been doing for years with surveys and censuses and register. Let's really evaluate the quality of the data. If we're going to use the data for important things such as policymaking, deciding, where should we send vaccines? Okay, are there certain areas of the country where we need more vaccines or whatever? We need to make sure that the quality of the data is very, very high. So one of the things for years now, I remember there was a quote, it's had to do with big data. Big data, you don't need surveys anymore because of big data and so forth. And official statistics we don't need because we have big data. Despite that feeling, there are many data users that I've heard from that are still willing to wait to get high quality data. Okay, and they are willing to wait, so they could get something online from somebody or some company, but they're still willing to wait for our data from Statistics Canada because it's high. They know it's high quality data, and they know they can trust that. And how can we ensure that we keep that trust? I think it's very important that we be very transparent. Okay, I always tell people, I said, if I was really, really that good, I wouldn't be working. I would have won the lottery or the Lotto Max, $300 million. I'd be retired, living on an island down south or something. But we don't know everything. But what we need to do is we need to be very transparent. Okay, we need to produce our numbers with quality indicators. We need to give data users an idea of, well, is this something I can rely on? We also have to use proven scientific approaches. Okay, and I think that's really important. And this is what we do. However, in my mind, and a little bit more in what Eric is saying, to change. Okay, we can't keep doing what we've been doing for 50 years. We have to adapt. So for instance, timeliness. I would be the first to admit, and I'm sure many others out there would admit, we're not always very timely. Okay, and sometimes we, as national statisticians, have to understand that timeliness is more important than accuracy. Again, a quote from our chief statistician: having data right important during a pandemic than having it be exact to the nth decimal. And that's absolutely true. There are methods out there that can be used to collect data very quickly. Crowdsourcing, okay, which is part of what methodologies called non-probabilistic samples. We were thinking, no, we don't want to do that. But you know what this pandemic has shown us? I think there's a time and a place for this. Okay, when we went into, I'll use the word lockdown. I'm not sure what else is being used around the world. Businesses needed information. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce was wanting to know how are their business or how are their members doing. So we did some crowdsourcing. Same thing. People wanted to know how are people coping with lockdown. So we did some crowdsourcing exercises on mental health. Okay, so we produced this, and we were very transparent. Though we didn't say that this is representative of the entire population. We said this is a crowdsourcing thing. This is representative of the people that responded, and the data was very, very useful for certain elements of the data users. What we need to do as statisticians is we got to figure out how can I incorporate these non-probabilistic methods, okay, or these new methods in with proven technologies so that we get the best of both worlds. And there are many, many good, very, very smart researchers working on this right now. Another example is time series models produce real-time estimates. Everyone talks about real-time estimates. I tend to use the word near real-time estimates. And I've always said, if you want a prediction for next month, so we give it to you with our time series methods. Except what happens is that the prediction isn't necessarily that accurate. But we're also looking at how can we use time series models to do near real-time estimates, combining with perhaps big data, auxiliary data, and so forth. We need to adapt and we need to embrace the modern methods. Okay, as I said earlier, my example of image processing, if we want to exploit alternative data sources, we need to use the modern methods. We can also use them to reduce costs. One prime example, and it's pretty much a no-brainer in my mind, is clothing classification. Okay, so we started using scanner data for groceries. We had a project description and we had to code it to our product classification. You could do it manually, but when you're getting hundreds and thousands and millions of records every month, it's almost impossible. So machine learning coding classification methods are really good for that. So I'll just close in saying that although we have to adapt, in my mind, we can never ever forget the fundamental principles of official statistics. And the four that I have here are scientific principles, statistical rigor, as I mentioned, transparency, confidentiality was also mentioned earlier, and I've also put the use of standards, which is kind of related to data stewardship. So in closing, I would say that the future of official statistics is really bright, but we can't sit on our laurels and just keep doing what we've been doing. I think we really do have to embrace sort of the new world, including methods and sort of the data needs of the data users. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wesley. Thank you. Okay, fantastic. So we've heard from our three speakers. So now it's time to hear from our three discussants. So first up, we have Sir Ian Diamond, the National Statistician of the UK. I think you're muted.
Can I just take this opportunity to start by thanking the organisers? It's a fantastic opportunity to say a few words on World Statistics Day, something I know we're all enormously celebrating right across the world. As the three speakers went through their presentations, I kept on ticking off the remarks that I was going to make and saying that's already been said then. And that reflects in many ways the fact that I think there is an enormous amount of communality between what people have said, and I think that's great. And I'd just like to start by addressing a question: is there a future for national statistics organisations? And I do believe that we are at a crossroads. I believe we could go down, as Erica said, a downward spiral, and I think we should not we should not think there is no competition here. On the other hand, I actually believe we've got an enormous opportunity. The pandemic has meant that we in the UK have moved 3 years down a 5-year strategy in 4 months, and doing so by really thinking through very quickly and very deeply many issues. For example, who do we work for? Well, you can say, okay, we work for the government. But actually, who does the government work for? The government works for every citizen in society, and therefore we work for every citizen in society. And we need to think about that when we think about not only the production of data, but the communication of information. All our speakers brilliantly have talked about the way in which data have been used recently. Well, they've been used, but they've also been communicated. And if people do not understand them and understand the nuances of them, then they will not, now move to some of the words that have been said, trust them. They will not think they are quality. And we need to remember that, because trust and quality, very highly linked together, are incredibly important, I think, in moving forward. Where I might disagree with one thing that said, people say our quality is not accuracy, it includes things like timeliness and relevance. I actually think that you can have timeliness, you can have relevance, and you can have accuracy at the same time. You need to be clear what it is that you are measuring. You know, a daily feed of number of people on the payroll in a country may not be absolutely accurate labour force data, but it's still accurate, and it is still a very timely indicator, one that we have been using very, very regularly amongst many others. Also, I believe independence is absolutely critical, but I think it is important to define independence, because too often people talk about independence as we, as national statisticians, will sit in our darkened office, we will put a cold towel on our heads, and we will dream up the statistics that the nation needs, calculate them, and throw them over a wall and hope they're useful. That, to me, is absolutely the way not to have a National Statistics Office in the future. Independence does not mean we do not engage in partnership, as Ola rightly said. It does not mean that we do not ask government, the civil society, business, the talk statistics that they need. The independence comes from us being rigorous and scientific in the way we calculate the numbers, and then at the end of the day, the numbers are the numbers. And that, to me, is very, very important. Just want to run very quickly through 4 planks of our strategy, which link into what the 3 speakers have said, or it's 3 of them do. One word has been missing, and I will focus on that in a moment. We need to be radical in the future. We need to be radical in the way we collect data and in the way we are prepared to analyze data. I really enjoyed saying, well, we've got to embrace new methods of analysis. I did my PhD in the 1970s. That is how old I am. And that was before we knew what, we were working at the time on how to do logistic regression. That at the time was an exciting new method. My gosh, it's going to change the world. 10 years later, we were working on multi-level models. My gosh, this is exciting. I'd see this nothing more than new statistics development over time. It's our beautiful subject moving forward in an exciting way. And administrative data have enormous opportunities, but we should not think that administrative data can be analysed without new methods to analyse them, and that is absolutely critical. But we can also use them in exciting new ways. We've worked out how to have real-time population. When I say real-time population, the only thing that's worrying me at the moment is perhaps having legislation to require absolutely blissed out fathers or mothers to be rushing within 6 hours of the birth to register their birth. That may be one step too far, but otherwise we think we can have, using methods, a population accurate to the last couple of days on our website. Now that's going to need administrative data, radical methods, radical analysis. We can get there, and to do that requires the second word. We need to be ambitious. We need to be absolutely ambitious that we as national statistics offices are critical parts of the national infrastructure, not an add-on, but absolutely central to everything the nation does. And I think we can get there. Thirdly, we need to be sustainable. We must talk about privacy, and I agree, but privacy is something which the public gives us a responsibility to do. So our public engagement around privacy and our public engagement about the way data are used is incredibly important. We must not think of public engagement as being walking up to people and saying, can I have your data? If I were to walk up to anyone and say, please, can I have your health data for the last 20 years? I'm sure I'll do something interesting with it. I suspect they would rightly say no. Instead, we need to engage people in what it is going to be used for, why it might benefit them, or indeed benefit society. And I believe you get a different answer. And also, as part of sustainable, we need to make sure that we are exciting the next generation in a career as a statistician and in national statistics, because the skills are important. My final word, and I'll finish. which has been missing and which I'm personally passionate about is inclusion. If we are not inclusive in everything that we do, then we will be failing our public, failing our citizens, and failing our government. Therefore, we need, I would submit, to be thinking very hard about who we are collecting data from. Are we collecting data from all members of society or representatives of all members of society, or are there groups who are excluded from our data? When we collect data, are we collecting data in a way that is inclusive? I would submit it is madness to collect data in the same data from everyone. Then let's put a dummy variable in the regression equation for gender and suggest that we are representing the lived experience of men and women. We absolutely are not. We need to collect data which represents lived experience, and then thirdly, analyze it in an appropriate way. So that who are we collecting data from? What are we collecting and how are we analyzing? Absolutely critical. We in the UK have just set up an inclusive data task force to really ask those questions and to think them through in a deep way, as well as ensuring that we have total inclusion in our staff and ensuring there are no glass ceilings anywhere. So let us be radical, let us be ambitious, let us be sustainable, but above all, let us be inclusive. I really enjoyed those three talks, and it's been a privilege to say a few words here this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Everything you said really resonates with me, and I'm sure with all of the panelists and our audience. So thank you. I think next up we have John Baylor, right?
Yes, indeed. Thank you. And I'm going to share my screen. I madly took notes while our colleagues were speaking, so I'll just share a couple of quick reactions to what I heard. First, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just comment on a few remarks that they made and say, well, what kind of resonated with me. But then also, I hope to challenge each of the speakers in the main presentations with a question or two to consider. Ola spent time talking about sort of the changes that we are seeing in practice, whether it's the responsibilities of moving from primarily production to also monitoring, managing data systems. The idea of the expansion of practice going from statistics to also including data science components. The idea that it once was a government gig opportunity work was now expanding to include many more partners. And in addition to the expansion of partners, there was this expansion of data sources, mentioning the ideas of open data, geospatial data, and other components. One question that I would have is, Ola, when you were talking about this idea of the legislation and fundamental principles and codes of practice, as you reflect on some of these changes in both responsibility and this expansion in terms of partners and data sources, what kind of changes do you see might be included or might be added to this legislation and fundamental principles? Erica, in discussing sort of the initial impact, talked about the idea of both challenges for NSOs and then opportunities and expectations that are increasing as part of the response. There are these increasing needs that were mentioned in terms of granularity of the information provided, the analyses, the timeliness, consistency, agility, independence, and privacy protection. I like the idea that there's both there's risk and reward that's potentially embedded in our future. There's potential for a great future, but without work, that the future of official statistics may be bleak. But I might add that that's true for about any operation, any organization. We have to be responsive and growing in terms of what's changing in the technologies that we use and these opportunities. So as I thought about questions here, I was wondering if there's, how do we educate and engage the public as owners and as beneficiaries of official statistics? So much of this important work is done, I think, without kind of appreciation and visibility. And then sort of as a related question, what are other things that we can do to avoid the worst case scenario that you painted? You mentioned kind of some prerequisites, but I'm just curious if as you look at this, what's the biggest hurdle that we will encounter and that we must address? Wesley, I mean, I like the idea of this definition of official statistics as an essential element of society. And this component of service, who is served by this group, particularly the government and the public. And the idea of, again, there was this looping back to this touchstone of fundamental principles and these properties of trustworthiness, quality, timeliness, relevance, and so on. I thought that, as I was thinking about this monopoly of the NSOs from 20 or 30 years ago, and I started thinking a lot about, education also was sort of this monopoly that's been expanding in terms of other ways that it's being delivered and offered and operationalized. The idea of what has changed, and I think sort of the idea of the power of the and is something that we all need to not fear, but to embrace. And I think the challenge to think about doing that embracing that power of the and with these other sources is something that's going to suggest, how do we use kind of our understanding as statisticians in approaching these new opportunities and doing it in a way that's systematic and meaningful. So one of my questions is the idea is that, well, everyone's now an analyst and a reporter. Well, what are things that we can do? What's our responsibility to help facilitate the statistical literacy that will enable the people that are functioning as in these roles to do it better? And what are some of the things that NSOs might do to contribute? I mean, by the way, I feel a call for this for all of us that are involved in professional societies to be thinking about how do we meet this particular need. My wrap up is Tim Harford's book, How to Make the World Add Up, had chapter 8 that was, don't take the statistical bedrock for granted. And that was basically a celebration of the relevance and importance of official statistics and federal statistics. And I would like to thank the speakers and to all of our colleagues that are working in this space, that are working in official statistics, for providing this foundation, this bedrock to our society. So thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this and for the opportunity to comment on these outstanding presentations.
Oh, thank you, John. That's fantastic. You work very well under pressure and very timely, right?
Yeah, I was thinking, gosh, I hope I was also accurate. I think I met the timeliness criteria, but the speakers will have to judge whether or not I achieved accuracy in my summary.
But it's definitely relevant, and it's amazing. You did the slides on the fly. Wow.
Yes, because we didn't have remarks or slides ahead of time. So yeah, that was very near real time. Great. Okay, so Rob, we have a few minutes for you, and then maybe a few minutes for questions before we have a wrap up with John Pullinger. So take it away, Rob.
Okay, thank you. Well, I am not John Baylor. I did not prepare slides in advance, but I do have a few things to say. And thank you for the opportunity to be able to address this wonderful event, Future of Official Statistics. So the comments that I make will pretty much, it's really difficult to make contributions beyond what's already been said, because all of the speakers and the persons providing commentary did such an exceptional job. So what I want to do is just focus on a couple of specific aspects and give a few comments on those. And I'll begin with this whole notion of future of official statistics. Now, when I think of official statistics, I think of gold standard calculations of statistics that are used for very important policy-making decisions, like what is the COLA, the cost of living increase for next year for retirees, or what is the current employment rate so that programs can be pushed out? What are the beneficiary rates? What are the health statistics? Things of that sort. And in terms of those types of official statistics, I would see those as requiring gold standard methodologies to collect accurate measures of what we're trying to make policy about, what we need to understand about ourselves in order to have a democracy. In terms of like federal or national statistical systems, it's not clear to me that we need only to focus on those types of official statistics or have them available. There are so many other sources of information and data that are available that could be useful in advancing our society, in developing good policy, but they aren't as critical as determining people's lives with regard to how much of an increase in Social Security or retirement benefit you're going to get. So I would like to think of the future of official statistics really as more of a future of statistics, a future of data, and how we can identify and isolate those statistics that require gold standard accuracy and timeliness versus those that can provide really useful information, but they don't have to hit such a high threshold of quality. The example I give to the latter is the current, I think it's still going on, the Pulse survey that the Census Bureau is doing. It's a random sample of households. It's using online methodologies. It's probability based, but when you calculate the response rates, it's down to single digits because it's online and it's based on a panel. But it captures what's going on in our society contemporaneously with regard to the COVID epidemic, the impact of the economic downturn, what's going on with kids in their schools, are they online versus not? Are people feeling, pressure with regard to finances and income and things of that sort? That's really useful information, but we don't necessarily need it to be a gold standard, because in this case, timeliness is more important than going through the multi-year process it would take in order to create a questionnaire and to test it out and to do a probability sample and to send out enumerators and so forth. So that was sort of my first point. The second is this whole notion of quality and accuracy. I love the commentary that accuracy is one element, but not the only element of quality. I like the notion that timeliness is also an element of quality, because what's the use of having information if it takes so long to generate? It's simply not useful. So I think that it definitely belongs there, and I like it as part of this overall notion of developing quality statistics and embedding that in how we deal with the future of statistics. Specifically, I like Ian's notion of inclusion, that we have to make sure we understand who we represent and then make efforts to represent those who have historically been excluded in the measurement process. But I would actually go a little bit further because some of the folks that we want and need to understand most in our society are those that are the most vulnerable amongst us. And standard things, and I'm not trying to criticize it, I'm just pointing to the current population survey. It estimates employment. The questions that are used to tap employment are primarily from a paradigm or a scenario where somebody has a regular full-time job and is going out and getting work. Well, in our current society, our COVID society, as well as where we were post-recession in 2008, there was a whole group of individuals who could not find a stable job, full-time job, and instead were in the gig economy and were cobbling things together or had 2 or 3 jobs. And those CPS questions, I mean, this notion of what's your full-time job and how much are you making just don't work. The point being that the accuracy should also reflect the cultural relevance of the situations of the different types of individuals that there are in our society, and we should be prepared to deal with that and then put things together in a way that we can report more accurately what's really going on. The final issue I wanted to raise was this whole notion of of disclosure. It's really important. More and more data isn't necessarily that, the panacea here. It's what you do with the data. And there are very definite uses for gold standard collected data, as well as sort of big data, just harvesting, putting administrative records data together, etc. But we need to understand that there are two elements to that. One is how well are the data gathered? There's already been a discussion about if somebody passes away and they from a heart attack, but they had COVID, how do you actually code that? There are those types of issues. But there's also the disclosure issue. If you put so much data together, then there is a risk of privacy, disclosure of personal identifying information. And there's a solution that really wasn't talked about that we might want to think about for the future of statistics, and that is the creation of synthesized data sets. Differential privacy is one method of doing that. There are others. And I think that may be a part of our future as well. So those were my comments, and I thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Rob. All right, Shelley, I don't think we actually have time for questions, do we?
Maybe we choose, let the panel member, maybe just one or two. I don't know if we can extend a little bit. I think probably maybe they choose one or two good questions to answer.
Okay. Can you see the questions? Do you want to pick one?
Yes, I can see the question. Yeah, but there are quite a few questions about education. Maybe that's a good one to answer. How do we generally, educate the general public about the kind of usefulness of the official statistics, because the participation of the general public is definitely important. Talking about these non-response rates, all these issues, right? What can be done here? That just as the public understand, it's everybody's participation is important, and they are the one who can contribute.
May I answer?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
I actually was, before this session, I was with the UN World Data Forum about this issue. And I provided so many examples in this regard. I mean, statistical literacy is really important, and thinking out of the box. I may provide really different examples that maybe you'll be a bit surprised. We worked with actors and actresses on a play theater about statistics and about gender gap and about women empowerment. And it has been really a very successful way of advocating really the public. It has been replayed during the whole year over and over and over in the theater all over Palestine and also in the local universities. This is one of the examples. We focus on the kids. So we have a kids website on our website. So you can open our website and there's a kids website where they actually also have games for the kids in school. We often do on yearly basis a competition between students for kids. And this has been really very successful. I want to mention that this year I thought that it's really very hard to do it. And then we were surprised that the schools were actually calling us, when you're going to start with it. Although, I mean, we were thinking that it's going to be this year a bit hard, especially that you can't do it face to face, and it's really hard to do it virtually. So we have so many examples that we can do and think out of the box. It's not something really very traditional. I may say also, we did video on the international days. For example, we did for December 3rd, a video on the International Day of Disabled. You know who talked about data? The disabled themselves. You know how much it meant the data when the disabled him or herself talk about the numbers. It gave so much meaning to the number rather when you put it on a press release. So you have so many ways and means really to work on that. We do really also games and video clips and so many aspects. And I may say these are just few examples just to save really time. But I mean, it's really important for us as NSOs to keep thinking out of the box, how we can be really very friendly in communicating with the public and with all of our target groups. This is really important. It shouldn't be really a tradition. Today, on the occasion of International Statistics Day, we launched something called the chatbot customer service, where you can, because we have more than 1 million in Palestine actually are using Facebook and Messenger. So we actually launched today on PCBS Messenger, the chatbot customer service, where you go to PCBS Messenger, you ask whatever you want, and it will automatically reply. This has been actually done after we prepared all our metadata since we actually produced data since 1994 until today. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad I chose that question because this is such a rich source of information. I would definitely follow up with you to produce something for Harvard Data Science Review. I do that all the time. And particularly this ties so well with Wendy and Donna's article. ASA had this initiatives on data science start with a kindergarten, and that's the article in Harvard Data Science Review. So I'm for us, we're in the education sector that we're incredibly passionate about doing this education. So you provide us with so many wonderful examples. I will definitely follow up with you separately to talk more about. I'm going to turn back to Wendy. We can get the closing, but that was a wonderful answer.
Yeah, thank you. Those are very inspiring examples of kind of thinking about unique ways that you could help people learn. And I really think personally that you're on the right track for what that's worth. I mean, that you're trying to reach people at a very young age, because I think that's what we need to do. So I love that. So I'm glad, Jolie, you're following up. I'll look forward to reading that article.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. I'm going to pass it to John Pullinger, who, if you would be so kind, is to have some closing remarks, and then we'll close the event. So go ahead, John, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Wendy. Well, I'm trying to just play back what I think I've got from this amazing session today. The first thing is that this really matters. Jolie started with Teresa Sullivan's article on statistics underpinning democracy, and Wesley then reminded us of the fundamental principle number 1 in the UN principles, that official statistics is an indispensable element of a democratic society. John Baylor then talked about statistics as a human right and kind of really at the core of our being able to kind of function as individuals. And Erica reminded us that this is especially important in times of conflict and partisanship. And boy, we certainly have those just at the moment. So it matters, but who does it matter to? Ola said, well, it used to matter mainly to the government, but it's much more than that now. It's the private sector, it's universities, it's civil society. And Ian then said, well, it matters to every citizen in society. And Rob's point that particularly we need to represent those who've historically been excluded, particularly the most vulnerable. So that kind of really hits. This is what we're aiming at here. So we need to care about that. So what do they need from us? Well, there are a long stream of things, particularly from Wesley, about they need information they can trust. They want good data stewardship. They want really to have confidence in the data. But they also want information they can use. Ian talked about communicating the data in ways people can understand. But several of the panelists talked about the granularity of the data, speed of the data, consistency of the data, but above all, the relevance of the data to the questions that they are concerned about. And Rob's example of the labour market, I think, struck a particular chord with me. So if that's what they mean, what they need, what does that mean for us? Well, I got three groups of things. The first one that Wesley started with was new methods. And I think Ola's examples of tourism, prices, transport and agriculture, they really showed up these kind of core things we talk about that we need to think totally differently about the way we collect the data. And linked with new methods, well, there's new sources. And again, Ola introduced geospatial data. We talked about images, we talked about AI. Wesley talked about crowdsourcing data and scanner data. It's not just what we collect in our surveys anymore, it's much broader. And that then means new relationships. An undercurrent, I think, about relationships with the population, particularly on issues like privacy. But again, I think the chord that seemed to strike most strongly here were Ian's chords on inclusion and sustainability here, that our relationships must be ones that bring people in and can serve us for the longer term. Wesley talked about we don't have a monopoly here and the power of and. It's not just one thing or another, it's this and this and this. And then Rob also talked about boundaries breaking down, and I liked his imagery. It's not just official statistics anymore, it's all of us in statistics are part of this endeavour. So we know it matters, we know who it matters to, we know what they need, we know what that means for us. So how do we do it? And a bunch of things came up here. There was the issue of new legislation, there was the issue of safeguarding integrity. Erica talked, maybe we need some organisational change. But I think core to me in this was, again, one of Ian's point that we need independence, but we don't need isolation. We need to be kind of setting a governance framework that is part of something, not separated from it. A strong theme then was about leadership and skills, and Ola's answer to the question that we had really demonstrates we need statistical literacy at all levels for the general public, but also for administrators, and better data science skills and high-end skills for people like us. Another thing, radical, was a word that came up. So we do it by having a mindset change. I think that was Erica's word. We need innovation, we need partnerships, we need coordination, we need to draw on all kinds of skills, not just statistical ones. And that then finally means it didn't come up too much, but it was there in some of them. We need money to make some of this happen. But a lot of it is about mindset. But that then takes me to my final point that came out from all of them. It's urgent. COVID was mentioned in several of the presentations, but also post-COVID is coming, and that's going to make what we've seen already a relatively straightforward thing. The different dimensions we're going to have to deal with over the coming years are going to be extraordinary. And Erica's image in her first slide of a clock ticking, I think, was a very, very powerful one. And she told us we can't just muddle through, because then we get into a downward spiral. I think John Baylor's quote from Tim Harford, we can't take what we've got for granted. And Wesley said, we can't keep doing what we have been doing. So Ola then said, we've got to think outside that box. And that finally then takes me to my final comment, which is Ian's point. Let's embrace this enormous opportunity and be radical, ambitious, sustainable, and inclusive. And that's a super message to end this fabulous World Statistics Day. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Okay, any final closing remarks, Shelley?
I just want to say this has been just enormous, I lost words how to describe. There's so much information, so much that goes on, and I really loved John's conclusion, and I think you summarized so well, and I find you all have this extraordinary ability to summarize so well in the time pressure, and it's great. And I like this emphasis on being urgent, so I want to actually remind all the panelists, all the speakers, write down whatever your thoughts there are, because I'm going to go after you very quickly, and we're going to produce this in written version for Harvard Data Science Review appear by the end of January. So we want to act very quickly because it's an incredibly important message. So we'll follow up on that, and I think we're perfect. It's 1 o'clock. I want to thank everyone for joining us from all over the world, and I think you have heard the most important thing for us to get the official statistics right, sustainable, is for everybody's participation, no matter who you are, what you can do. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Xiaoli, and all of the other participants.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, I'm
All
ready
the
for
best.
them to be radical and ambitious and timely.
Yes, and we did it perfectly well. It's 1 o'clock
All right.
on time. Thanks all. You'll hear from me very soon.